Hi everybody, so in this video I'm comparing and contrasting Atomfall with Resident Evil, and specifically the footage you're seeing of Resident Evil is Resident Evil Village, and you may be wondering why the footage I always show for Atomfall in these comparison videos is the same. Well, that's because one of the true joys of playing Atomfall is discovery, and I don't want to give anything away. So don't worry, I'm not trying to say one of these games is better than the other, because they are very, very different. The Resident Evil series as a whole, especially the modern games, and of course Atomfall. However, I do believe they have certain common factors, which means that if you enjoyed Resident Evil, I think you'll enjoy Atomfall, and you should check out, even if it wasn't on your radar. Similarly, if you've enjoyed Atomfall, and maybe this is the first type of game you've played that's like this, and like, wow, that was great, I enjoyed that, then Resident Evil should 100% be on your radar and on your wish list on Steam or Xbox or PlayStation to play. So you could say, and the devs describe Atomfall as an action survival. It's set in a post-apocalyptic quarantine zone in the north of England in the 1960s, and something like Resident Evil Village is kind of in the modern to close future era set in Eastern Europe, where Resident Evil Village is anyway. And you could say that modern Resident Evil games are survival shooters, because it's basically around shooting people, isn't it, as you're going along. However, what both games have is that limited inventory problems that you have, where you have to juggle with what you're carrying. So you've got to do a lot of inventory management. Now, obviously, Resident Evil is on a much bigger scale in terms of the detail of the game. I think we can probably say that Atomfall is a AA game, and we could say that Resident Evil games are AAAs in terms of the quality of the graphics and the sheer detail that goes everything. But Atomfall gets pretty close, and the Atomfall world, although it's an open world where Resident Evil is a lot more linear, I guess, I think Resident Evil games tend to take quite a while to play, whereas Atomfall you can finish in less than 20 hours. But that inventory management side to it, coming back to that, is the fact that what you choose to take with you affects the way that you can play the game, and that can be like your choice, but also it can be forced upon you by what you find, with limited ammo and limited resources. And I think that's, if you enjoy that sort of thing, you enjoy being restricted and having to concentrate on making sure you use those headshots, to making sure you use everything at your disposal to get you through the game, then Atomfall and Resident Evil are really similar in that sort of way. Both games have things like weapon upgrades. They've both got traders as well, although in Atomfall the traders, it's all about bartering. It's a much more limited system. Maybe you could even think of Atomfall as kind of like an open world Resident Evil light. And the fact that, they both have the inventory box system. I mean, Resident Evil, I guess, invented it, didn't it? Where you can put stuff into a special type box, and then you can access the stuff that's in the box from many other places on the map. So, although you do have a limited space in your backpack, you can play around with that. Both games are about exploration and discovery. Obviously, and there's not really any puzzles in Atomfall, but there's fetch quests and there are mysteries that you've got to kind of figure out. With Resident Evil, obviously, because it's a lot more linear, you tend to come up against hard stops. Until you can solve this puzzle, you can't go any further. Where Atomfall is very much allows you to approach things in different ways. Is that if there's a particular item you need to get through a particular area, there'll be multiple ways of getting that item, and there'll be multiple examples of that item in the world as well, so that if you choose to go through the world in a certain way, you'll find it, or you might find this item in another way. Let's say it's a key, okay. Actually, that's probably a bad example. Let's say it's a device that you need to go through a particular area. In Atomfall, there will be multiple examples of that device in different places, where in Resident Evil you don't really get that. Obviously in Resident Evil, you don't normally have different endings. I'm trying to think if there are different endings. I mean, they tend to have different versions of the game, like in Resident Evil 2 Remake, don't they, where you can replay it using different characters and starting in different places. What's very, very common, though, between both games is this great atmosphere and great worlds that have been built by Capcom in case of Resident Evil, and Rebellion in the case of Atomfall. And you kind of also have, if you go back to something like Resident Evil 2 Remake or Resident Evil 3 Remake, but especially Resident Evil 2 Remake, where you're going through something like the Raccoon City Police Department, and then you progress through the game, and then all of a sudden you're in a completely different area, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. You have loads of feelings like that within Atomfall. And I really think that Atomfall is a blueprint for an open world Resident Evil game. The way that it's designed could be Resident Evil. In fact, the reason why I chose Village for the comparison video in this, even though there's not much going on, is in Village in Resident Evil 8, you have this hub system, don't you, where you're in the village and you go off and you visit the different houses for the different baddies, and then you get the bits of Rose to bring her back together to proceed through the game. Now, Atomfall is much more open world than that, but as you're going through it, Atomfall, and you're going to like the forested area, and you're going into the caves and the caverns, and you're going into the bunkers, you could really imagine them being areas in a Resident Evil game. And I really hope the next Resident Evil, they look at like something like Atomfall and go, yeah, okay, we can do this. We can make an open world Resident Evil game where you're not just going from quest marker to quest marker, but rather you kind of have to solve the mystery of what's happening in the world to escape or to save someone or do something like that. So if you've enjoyed Atomfall and you've never played a Resident Evil game, you definitely should, and start with the modern ones. I think if I was going to say which one to start with, I would say start with Resident Evil 2 Remake or Resident Evil Village. I really enjoy Resident Evil Village. It's more of an action game than a horror game, but it's still pretty amazing. And if you enjoy Resident Evil, definitely check out Atomfall, because that thing like inventory management and trying to figure out what's going on, and this mystery, the fact that people are underhanded and you can't trust them, and there's other stuff going on, is really prevalent throughout this game. So both games absolutely amazing. Well, most the series in terms of Resident Evil, and I think if you like one, you should definitely check out the other. But what do you think? Put your questions and comments down below, and of course I'll see you again soon.